Hello and welcome to my new show, Over Examination, where I spend way too much time thinking out loud about X-Men comics. Let's dive right in. So you've seen those X-Men movies, right? They've been pretty successful. Remember that one dude, William Stryker? Not Willis Stryker, that's a Luke Cage character. I'm talking about Colonel William Stryker, the evil army guy. You remember him, right? He was that bad guy in X2. He turned out to be the guy who made Wolverine into a metal skeleton murder machine, and he developed some weird way to brainwash mutants so that he could stage an attack on the president, one of the coolest action scenes ever, and then he used that attack to get authorization to attack the Xavier School, and he captured Charles Xavier and brainwashed him by using his brainwashed mutant son so that Xavier would use a Cerebro machine that Stryker built to kill all the mutants in the world. Wow. That is a convoluted plan, but hey, superhero movie, so it's all good, right? And then he showed up in X-Men Origins Wolverine, aka the movie you wish I didn't just remind you of, where he handled some weird Spec Ops team thing and then made a not Deadpool and had sleeper agents in Wolverine's life so he could manipulate him into getting the adamantium procedure or something. I don't know, that movie was pretty bad. Anyway, an even younger Stryker shows up in Days of Future Past as an army guy who bodyguards Boulevard Trask, who's a businessman and not a government dude, so why is an evil army man acting as his lackey? You know what? Movie Stryker doesn't make any goddamn sense. And there's a reason for that. It can all be traced back to X2, where the filmmakers decide to tie Stryker's to Wolverine's backstory, because these movies need to be all Wolverine all the time. To do this, they basically ended up tossing out almost every aspect of the comics version of Stryker, except that he's still a bigot, still has a mutant son, and still had a plan that involved using Xavier to psychically attack mutants. And that's it, really. See, the comic book version of William Stryker has nothing to do with Wolverine's origins. Also, comic Stryker is not Colonel William Stryker, but rather Reverend William Stryker, televangelist, founder of the Stryker Crusade movement, and leader of the anti-mutant hate group, the Purifiers. Yeah, you can kind of see why Fox decided to change this. Having the villain be a fire and brimstone preacher would have probably invited more controversy than they wanted, but this spinelessness cost us a film version of one of the most terrifying villains in the X-Men canon. Reverend William Stryker first appeared in the Marvel original graphic novel God Loves, Man Kills. It was published in 1982, written by Chris Claremont and illustrated by Brent Anderson. God Loves, Man Kills tells the story of the rise of the Stryker Crusade, as the televangelist uses his platform to reach millions of people and preach a gospel of hate, telling them that mutants are possessed of the devil and that it is God's will that the faithful oppose mutants at every turn. Considering X2 has a scene that makes mutants an explicit metaphor for LGBT individuals, have you tried not being a mutant? Keeping Stryker as a reverend would have definitely created a stronger message, strengthening the metaphor considerably. Granted, God Loves, Man Kills seems more focused on racial metaphors. The book opens with Stryker's Purifiers lynching two mutants who just happen to be young black children. Magneto finding their corpses with hate speech written on their bodies is arguably one of the most powerful scenes in the book. God Loves, Man Kills is also notable in that the X-Men's victory in the story is achieved through non-violent means, at least on their part. During the climax, Stryker activates his plan to psychically attack mutants during a live broadcast of a sermon. The X-Men stop his machine and then confront him in front of the whole world, where they oppose him with words rather than actions. Stryker eventually becomes enraged enough that he attempts to kill Kitty Pryde, the X-Men's youngest member at the time, and a 13-year-old girl, on live television. But he is stopped by the very police who had been assigned to protect him. It's an excellent sequence that, in my opinion, elevates God Loves, Man Kills to being one of the best X-Men stories ever written. While Stryker was left in comic limbo for a few years after the publication of the graphic novel, he did eventually return around the time X2 came out. There was an utterly forgettable sequel to God Loves, Man Kills, and I would say that it was his appearance in New X-Men Childhood's End that really sold him as a monster. He and his Purifiers blow up a bus of school children, assassinate a teenage girl, torture a teenage boy to death, and attempt to trap and ambush another teenage girl, all while emphasizing their holy mission and the supposed sinfulness of the mutants that they're fighting. The fact that their attempted ambush was against Soraya Kadir, aka Dust, a devout Muslim, just helped underscore that. And this really is what makes Stryker a terrifying villain in the comics. His hate feels real, because it is the same kind of hate you see when you turn on the news or look at the pastors of megachurches. Stryker talks about mutants the same way certain preachers in real life talk about gay people, transgender people, Muslims, you name it. He's such an effective antagonist because his rhetoric is chillingly familiar, and this is why Fox did a huge disservice by stripping out that aspect of the character and turning him to a generic evil army dude. The film version of Stryker is not interesting. He does not stay with you. He's a bad Saturday morning cartoon villain who feels disconnected from reality. And if you're trying to make an artistic statement about prejudice and bigotry, that kind of villain is someone you can't afford to have. Because an over-the-top villain like that feels unreal, like no one in real life could possibly have these kinds of views. And if your views are milder than his, then you're okay. If the film version of Stryker had remained a preacher, if the movies had looked at the rhetoric of anti-LGBT pastors for inspiration for his lines, that would have made a statement. That would have held up a mirror to our society. Yes, it would have been controversial, but controversy generates discussion, and this is a discussion that even now, over a decade later, we still haven't really had. But the X-Men movies missed their chance. They threw that chance away. William Stryker is the biggest mistake these movies ever made.